Ever wondered how a cancer diagnosis can rewrite our journey? Or how facing cancer at a young age can reshape our perspective on life, love, and the future? Hi, and welcome to Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, the podcast by the Kidney Cancer Association, diving deep into the raw stories of kidney cancer patients and survivors. I'm Anna Maria Scaccia, your guide through the real, unfiltered experiences that often go untold. Our guest, Jason Hinojosa, discovered the answer to life's unexpected twist when he was diagnosed with kidney cancer. Twice. Join us as he shares his experience balancing work and ambition, finding support in others, and becoming a parent while fighting cancer. In the next hour, we'll explore Jason's story of love, courage, and community, and what it means to hold on to hope to celebrate life's milestones. Well, Jason, it's lovely to chat with you. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I would love it if you could introduce yourself to our audience in case they don't know you already.
So my name is Jason Hinojosa. I'm originally from Houston, Texas, and I've been living in Seattle for just a little over 11 years now. I moved out here to go to graduate school right after my first bout of cancer, right when I was like 28 or so. And as soon as I moved out here, just really fell in love with everything Seattle had to offer, and just moved here. During my day job, I'm a marketer for technology companies, as well as I do a lot of marketing advising for a young people trying to move into the technology career who come from like underserved backgrounds, as well as advising like startups, early stage startups that are looking to grow and help you with marketing advice and go to market strategies.
So you mentioned your first bout of cancer at 28, and that's the whole point of this episode is talking about cancer at a young age. So I'd love to just dig into your experience, just kind of dealing with it, when, you're not even 30, right? Like you hadn't even hit 30 yet.
So it was I'll go ahead and sort of like give the overview story of kind of how it all happened. But at the time I was young and reckless. I felt invincible, and just did things that most 28-year-olds are doing. I was working at my first technology job at the time, but very much would go out and very social, hanging out with friends, partying. Just kind of doing everything a typical 28-year-old would do in Houston. And then one morning it was a Sunday morning. I remember it was Super Bowl Sunday morning, actually, at 2011. I remember this. I met up with some friends at a coffee shop, and during the day, like, I was feeling some pain in my back, but I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I pulled a muscle. At the time I was doing lots of working out and running, going to the gym, all of that, and was kind of feeling this pain, but just sort of thought it was from activity, and went to this coffee shop with my friends, having some coffee, and then I was leaving to go to a Super Bowl party that evening. And as soon as I got into my car, I just felt the pain went from sort of something that was bugging me to like something that was like very noticeable and like taking away my attention. It was just like, ow, this like really hurts. And within, I would say, 20 minutes of kind of sitting there, kind of adjusting and trying to drive home, I just had to pull over. And I remember it was a post office parking lot, so the whole place was empty, and I just like had to pull over because I was like in excruciating pain, and called my parents. Was like, hey, I don't know what's happening, but this is where I'm at. I'm in a ton of pain. I can't drive anymore. My mom and my brother show up, and at that point I'm on the ground in a parking lot, just
Mm.
like in just in pain, just like not even paying attention to what was around me, just like on there, in pain. My mom freaks out and immediately rushes me to the hospital in Houston, and it ends up being it was a kidney stone, and I had
Mm.
got this kidney stone, not sure why, but got the kidney stone. And as they were doing tests on me, to determine where the kidney stone was, how big it was, the doctor noticed that there was a shadow on so I had the kidney stone on my left kidney. There was a shadow on my right kidney.
Mm.
And he was like, you need to immediately check this out. This looks very dangerous. So I called in for work the next day, missed the Super Bowl, was in the hospital the whole night, called in to work the next day, went to go see a urologist, and he was like, that is a massive, that's a mass. We don't know if it's cancerous or not. They didn't have any idea, but it's a mass, and it's completely contained on your kidney. And, we need to do tests on that. And also on your other kidney, there's a kidney stone. So it was just sort of like this, like, and up to that point in my life, I'd been relatively really healthy, never had any bouts of any kind of sickness, any kind of allergies, but spent very little time in the doctor just besides like annual checkups and stuff. So it like really hit me, it's just like, whoa, all of a sudden, you think, one day you're out partying, having fun, careless, not needing to do anything, to all of a sudden like, whoa, I have these like huge issues. At that time, the urologist decided that based on the size of the kidney stone or the mass, he did do some tests, found out it was a tumor, decided by the size of the mass that we need to go in and remove that before it spread.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of determined it was cancer, it was a tumor, and we need to get that out. So within a month of that happening, I spent the next month basically getting ready to go on long-term disability.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, we're going to open it. We're going to open you up. We're going to take out the kidney. You're going to go through this long period of recovery. And so spent that next month like really just prepping for this, and it was just sort of this sort of crazy like juxtaposition, like I mentioned, where you are yeah, where I went from being healthy to like I don't know what I don't know what the next part of my life's going to be like, and then within a month, almost a month to the day of that, finding out that happened, I was walking into the hospital, going in for an open surgery and removing the kidney, which at the time they did find out it was cancerous after they
Yeah.
took it out and did the biopsy on it, that it was cancerous. And then, yeah, that's that's sort of how I found out. And then, it was an open surgery, so I have this pretty massive scar across my abdominal section, across my stomach. Uh, and because it was an open surgery, I really spent the next like 3 months post surgery
Mm-hmm.
just trying to get back to normal. Like I was walking super slow, and a lot of times I was having to take wheelchairs. Like if I went to like an airport, or if I went anywhere where it required walking, I would need to go on a wheelchair because I would just get exhausted. And really from like that point, the next 3 months were just trying to get to normal, and then like the 6 months post that were trying to get back in shape. At that point, I was completely out of shape.
Yeah.
I was extremely tired, and then just like having to rebuild all of my muscles and like get back to being able to be active.
No, there are a few things I want to touch on there. So I think the first one is like having been 28, having, kidney cancer and learning that you had kidney cancer. What was going through your mind, right? Like whether, within that first month, within the 3 months after, like what were some of the things that you were experiencing emotionally, mentally?
I think emotionally, I was, in full transparency, I think a piece of it is I try to suppress a lot of my, a lot of the scare, the scariness I had around it. I wasn't, I think even up to that point, like anytime I heard the word cancer, I associated with death.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was a lot of that. And so being so young, and yeah, being so young, I try to really suppress those thoughts, and
Yeah.
really thought like, okay, and really, honestly, just try to really start looking forward. I almost like try to ignore the fact that I had cancer, and ignore the fact that this stuff was happening. It was just like, okay, this is happy. I'm going to get rid of it. But what's one year going to look like? What's 2 years going to look like? What am I going to do when this is all recovered? How am I going to get back in shape? What of my books am I going to read? And I was just like really trying to focus, and really trying to be positive about everything that was happening, even though like in the back of my mind, like it was like cancer equals death.
Yeah.
And and really, I think that's kind of like I mentioned when I moved to Seattle. That was sort of one of like the during that period is when I decided I want to go back to business school. I want to go back to college. I want to come out of this stronger than I ever was. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna I'm gonna go back to school, and I'm gonna get an MBA. And so started studying for my GMAT during this period. Took my GMAT during this period, applied to business school, and was like, okay, I'm gonna come out of this better than ever. Versus I think didn't really like face what was happening head on, or
Yeah.
really kind of really think about, or really like unpack my feelings. At that point I wasn't ready to do that yet, and I was just really looking forward 100%, even looking out 5 years, like I'm gonna survive this, and I'm gonna be alive in 5 years, and what does 5 years from now look
Yeah.
like? And I look at that now and I realize like how counterproductive that was. Like I think later in my journey I approached those feelings, and I really started to really start to unpack that. And I think that was more healthy. But at that point, I didn't really know how to deal with any, I didn't know really how to deal with any kind of traumatic information or something like that. And it was just more so like, I went back to like my training years of like, okay, when I got injured, when I was running, when I was younger, I did physical therapy and I trained a different way, and I tried to come out of the injury stronger. And I kind of took that same approach with this of like, I'm gonna make myself better during this period of time that's supposed to be negative. I'm gonna find ways to be positive and come out of this like stronger than I have, or stronger
Yeah.
than I was.
Yeah, I was going to say I had a very similar reaction. I wasn't diagnosed as young. I was diagnosed at 37, but that's still relatively, young compared
Young, yeah,
to the
exactly.
average, right? And I had very much the same reaction. Like I spent the first, year or so, like I'm going to do this for other people who bodybuild and make a change and do this advocacy, and then that all went to crap. But the reason why I bring that up is that for me, I think that was also partly driven by my urologist, because the one thing that he said when I went to him was, "You're so young. I don't see this in young, fit women." Right. And then afterwards, it was, well, we got it all out. We got your left kidney out. It's gone. You're fine. You're going to live a very long life. Like there was very much this, attitude of, well, you're young. You're going to be okay. And then, and then on top of that, going back to what you were saying with the death sentence, there was this article I was reading about, cancer in the media. And one person who was interviewed was saying that it's still portrayed as a death sentence. It's still portrayed as this fatal thing, which in many cases it can be. It's not, cancer is not the flu, right?
Exactly.
But at the same time, it still puts especially younger survivors in this headspace of, well, I have it, so therefore I'm going to die. And it kind of just, I think it messes with you a bit more with that. I don't know if you kind of have the same feeling or same thoughts or something, or
No,
reaction.
I mean, I think the way you mentioned in your experience is almost identical. I think, I think what's interesting is my urologist kind of said the exact same thing, in that sense, like, we found it early. You're going to be, we're going to get out, we're going to take your kidney out. You can survive on one kidney. You're going to be fine. But then also, like, I think that was sort of like the first time I ever really started thinking about death.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I was just, death was just so far away, and the possibility of me dying was just so far away. And here it's just like, really started to think, and I mean, almost identical to exactly what he says. I almost started to think about like, well, what is my legacy in the world? Like, I have this job. It's okay. I'm making a living, but I'm not doing anything I'm passionate about. Like, what positive things am I doing into the world? And it's like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need to get this additional education and jump into a new part of my career and do these amazing things and give back. And yeah, so I mean, it's almost identical to that. It's almost really identical to that situation where, why they still think those things were really positive for me to do, and I'm really glad I did them all. I think also think there was a piece of it of like the emotional, like dealing with it and unpacking
Mm-hmm.
those feelings where I really did suppress for years, and it wasn't until I became more emotionally intelligent that I realized like I need to do something about this. Like this,
Yeah.
I'm carrying this trauma and I'm just suppressing it down, and even though like the decisions I made came out of it being positive, there's still this like trauma inside of me that's eating me up, and I need to like unpack that if I'm going to be a better person, if I'm going to be happy, if I'm actually going to truly be happy with the decisions I made. I need to unpack all of this trauma, which I didn't do until my mid 30s.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that's probably an experience for a lot of cancer survivors, no matter their age.
Yeah.
But I do think, just speaking to other younger cancer survivors, that it tends to be more pronounced for us, because there's this
Yeah.
idea that we have 20, 30, 40 years ahead of us, we'll be fine. And in my case, the same thing. Spent the first year or so just like really going after advocacy. Got to this point where I'm like, no, maybe I need to focus on me more. Like the trauma's coming out in certain ways. And then I get hit with a second primary, totally different cancer this year. And I was like, you know what? This time around, I'm going to take those 8 weeks to like adjust to what I need to adjust to. And also actually deal with the emotion of it and like really connect with myself. Right. I was personally always afraid of death, but then once I had cancer, it became a whole different philosophical beast that just hasn't
Yeah.
left my mind.
Yeah. And then over here, did you just say that you had you dealt with a second bout of it as well?
No, not a second bout of
Yeah.
kidney cancer, a second primary. So I had thyroid cancer over the summer. And so I had kidney
Oh.
cancer back in 2020. And then this summer I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So it was a completely different
Oh.
cancer. And I think that's, and I know from your story, just because you're a Casey ambassador, we've been on a panel once together and I've seen you a couple of things, that I know you had a second bout of it. So if you want to get into that too a bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And so, as part of my recovery process from the first bout, I would do these sort of regular check-ins. And initially, it was the first year. It's like they check one
Yep.
year later, and then it's like 2 years. And I got to a point in my recovery where my urologist only wanted me to come every 3 years.
Okay.
And so, I was doing that. I did a couple of those, and everything was fine. And at this point, my urologist even told me like you know, you're very low for having it, come back now. You've passed a lot of the major milestones. And one of my checkups really was coming in October of 2020, and so this was like right in the heart of COVID. I was, at this point, I kind of believed like cancer was behind me now, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go back just because hospitals were were just in the middle of COVID. It was just it was just a weird time, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go. My wife's really pushing me to go. She's like, no, you need to go. You need to go, and so I went and took my my normal test, kind of went through like and I was like nothing, and then my urologist calls me up again, and he's like, we saw a shadow, we don't know what it is.
Mm.
We need a we need to we need you to come in and do another test. It's like uh-oh, it's just like you get
Yep.
that feeling like uh-oh, like okay. So he's like, can you come in tomorrow? And I was like, yes, I can come in tomorrow. So I come in the next day, do like a CT scan with like high contrast CT scan, so a
Mm-hmm.
more intense test. And I remember this, and it's like, okay, you'll get results back. Like I think I took the test on Thursday, and he was just like, okay, you'll get the results back on Monday. So I'm like thinking, okay, I have like the weekend to go through this, and then Friday night I get a call from a strange number, and I'm like, huh, this number, it's like a 206 number, so it's from Seattle. So I'm like, this is interesting. It's Friday night, and it's COVID, so we're at home. No one's like
Yeah.
going out. And I answered, and he's like, and it's my urologist. He's like, hey, we saw it. It's you grew like it's a 2 centimeter, a tumor is growing back in your remaining kidney, and it's just like, and all of a sudden it just sort of hits me, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
like here it is. Uh, Luckily this time around, because of the condition I was in, he referred me to a special urologist that does these like partial nephrectomies, where he invented a surgery technique that actually used like the Da Vinci method, so
Yeah.
these big robot arms. And his name is Dr. Porter. He's here in Seattle, and very hard to see him. But because of my condition and my age, he was just like, we want you to, I want you to. He's like, I'm gonna send a referral. I need you to call Monday morning and try to get into surgery. And it was just like, at that point, I think that's really when I, just sort of like, here it is again. And, given my first experience, it was like such a long recovery process. It was open surgery. All I heard this time around is you have cancer again. You need to go through treatment. And I just sort of broke down. It was just like
Yeah.
at that point, it was just my wife was there, and it was just like, luckily, with having that support, we just sort of like felt it. And this time around, like, given that I was so much more in tune with my emotions, and I did work with therapists sort of before that, I was just like, I can't, I'm just gonna let myself feel it this time.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, here it is. I have cancer. There's like nothing I can do about it now. And so really spent like Friday night just saying, okay, this is it. I didn't call any of my family yet and let them know about it. I just wanted to. I knew they were gonna worry. I knew they were gonna get scared, and I just wanted to take that night to just let it all sink in. And I think handling it that way was a lot more, healthy. I woke up Saturday morning, like, still felt bad, but realized that I could get through it this time, and I have
Yeah.
like support. I have like support. Things were strong, and I felt better about it, and knowing that like I have good care. So called Monday morning, got in the queue with this doctor, and then by Wednesday or Thursday of that week, they're like, okay, we want to move up your surgery, and we want you to come in on Monday. So it's really like, so I had really Friday to go into short-term disability. Luckily Washington State has some really amazing care from the state
Yeah.
uh, that supports people going into sickness. Uh, sort of the short-term disability thing that yeah, kind of, it's just beautiful. Like they guarantee your job. The state pays your salary for you while you're recovering. So really spent all of Friday getting all of my things in order, letting my team know, and went into surgery. And I mean, Dr. Porter was amazing. The surgery went well. They cut out just the tiniest sliver. I think the one thing that's still sort of scary is that he told me, by this point, because you've had it twice and you're so young, you're probably going to have it again. So I got
Uh,
into a wholly different medical care. I have a nephrologist now, as well as a urologist that I see every six. Well, I see my nephrologist about every 6 months, and we're looking at kidney health and
yeah.
blood pressure, diet, all of that. And then I have my urologist that I see once a year now, that's going through like CT scans and MRIs, um, and that piece. But the second time around, because it was laparoscopic surgery with the
Mhm.
lasers, my recovery was just so much different. It was there was these tiny incisions that they went through, but I was back home and walking within the week. Um, and I was back home and walking within the week. I was still slow, and I couldn't like swing a golf club or do lift stuff, but I could actually walk and like get some exercise in and clear my mental head. But I think this time that made it so unique is at the same time that I was coming home from the doctor, my wife and I found out we were pregnant, and that was
Uh-huh.
something that we were doing. We began trying before all of my tests, and then when I got home, she's like, I this would be the time we would know if we were pregnant. And so when she went to pick up my medication, she also picked up a pregnancy test. And when I was home, like my first full day of being home, it's like, oh, and by the way, we're gonna have a baby. And it's just like, and so this recovery, it was just so much different. It was less about myself
Yeah.
and what I need to do. How do I come out of this stronger? And more about what relationship, or what do I need to do so that I have a relationship with my child, so that
Yeah.
I'm healthy for my child. Like, it's this is like this whole other being that exists that you're trying to make these right decisions for. It's no longer, I need to go back to school. I need to do this for my job. It's like, no, I need to eat healthy because I need to take care of myself because I want to be around to see my child graduate from high school, graduate from college, get married, start her own family. Uh, and so, yeah, this whole second time around was just like, it was less about me and more about like every decision I'm making for my daughter. Which at the time was my child, but now I know she's
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
now, and now I know she's my daughter. And it's like, now every decision I make, I'm making it for her because I want her to have a relationship with me, and I don't want to be in and out of dialysis all the time. I don't want to continue getting sick. I don't, I want to live a healthier life for her.
I know you just started touching it, but I'd love for you to go into that more about how, I guess, being young, having cancer just really does change your relationship to the people around you and the family around you. Because I too, I have a son. He was 5 at the time. And, when I
Uh-huh.
found out that I had cancer, just everything, I went from, okay, I have to work 60 hours a week because I need to make money so I could give you a good life, to I need to stop working 60 hours a week because I need to be present to be in your life. And so I would love for you to just kind of, I know the second time around your wife was pregnant. Sorry, I don't know why that was hard. Your wife
Yeah.
was pregnant, but kind of just talk me through what was in your head.
Yeah, it was just I mean it was a lot. It's a lot, but it sort of touched on it a bit. It was so much more about like what can I what can I do to be the best version of myself? Like I mentioned, I was just like you. I was a very, at this point in my career, I was a very ambitious, career-driven
Mm-hmm.
person. I worked a lot. I put my work at the forefront of everything I did, and even though I kept great relationships with my family and my partner, it was just like work was the most important thing. And that when you have a child, as you know, that
Yeah.
that changes dramatically. It's just like, wow, no, it's like work is always there. You can always work. There's just like, when you're ambitious, it's just like this never ending stream of work. The more work
Yeah.
you do, the more work there is, and it's sort of like this never ending cycle. And I just realized that, like, when you face death, when you face sickness, when tomorrow is not guaranteed, when next year is not guaranteed, when 5 years is not guaranteed, you realize, like, you think, instead of thinking in terms of like how much money can I make, how much security, it's like you start thinking in moments.
Mm-hmm.
you know what moments do I have with my daughter? And there's just the tiniest things, like being able to read her bedtime stories at night, and her cuddle up in
Mm.
my arm, and like, read, or being able to cook her breakfast and seeing her like different foods, being able to take her to the playground and seeing her smile. Like, those are the things that are most important, because those are the things when bad things happen, when you're facing death. I'm not, and in the past, when I was facing sickness and uncertainty, I'm not thinking about what my job is thinking. I'm not thinking
Yep.
about, oh, what could how much more work could I've done, or how much harder could I've done on that project. You're thinking about, like, am I going to see my mom again? Am I going to
Mm-hmm.
see my wife again? Am I going to be able to celebrate our fifth, wedding anniversary in a few years with my wife? And then now it's like, am I going to be able to see my daughter turn 3? Am I going to see her run? Am I going to see her play? And you just realize that, like, work is not the most important thing. That when you're lying in your deathbed, it's like the relationships you have, the people you speak to, the deeper things, the reasons why you're working, or like those are the reasons that are most important. And work is just like a proxy, or just something you use to create security.
Yep.
But really, in reality, it's kind of further. It's like that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like,
Yep.
work and that security, they kind of fit somewhere like in the middle. But at the end, it's all about like the tribe you create, and the people you're around, and the relationships you have. And like, when you're lying there in these situations, like, that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so I think about it from that way. I mean, I think that was like the biggest realization for me. It's like, I don't want to work 60 hours a week. I want to read my daughter bedtime stories. I want to watch TV with her. I want to cook her dinner. I want to take her to school. And that's more important than work could ever be.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, this recent bout with thyroid cancer, after I went back to work, my son is in an after school program, and there was one day I picked him up, and I'm like, well, it was like 4 or something. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
I'm done with work. And he's like, really? Why? You usually work when I get home. I'm like, you know what? It's different this time. It's like, I started work, I got my 8 hours in. I don't, that email I would have answered, that could wait. Like, I'd rather just bond with you. I just, again, like you said, you start thinking in those moments. But I do want to pivot because it's kind of related. But talking more about your experience with how people saw you, right? Like we talked about our urologist telling us that we were so young. What are some other ways that, because of your age, people, maybe you experienced in the world in terms of how people regarded you or treated you for, being a cancer survivor? If that makes sense. I could also rephrase. I'm not good
Yeah.
at articulation.
Yeah. No, no, I definitely think it makes sense. I feel like, for, like, sort of interesting. I think in one case, like I didn't get to see a lot of it because of my surgery, and especially the second time around, my surgery and my recovery all happened during COVID. So it was like in deep COVID time. So
Yeah.
it was very much isolation already. I
Yeah.
was already on my own, and we were all working from home all the time. No one, everything. Um, so in that case, I can only really kind of judge it based off of how people talk to me. But I definitely felt like, I think I was lucky enough where I worked at the time, I had a really great relationship with a lot of people, and I got lots of messages and lots of cards. So I definitely felt the sympathy and the empathy from I guess my direct coworkers
Hmm.
and like my family and my wife's family, who was amazing during all of this as well. Uh, could feel like they sort of understood, but it was also like in a lot of cases, like again, like I think with cancer,
Yeah.
you cancer equals death in a lot of people's minds. That's the perception of cancer. So I think in a lot of times, I think a lot of people, I felt the just like people didn't know how to come. People didn't
Yeah.
really know. Like they sort of tiptoed around it. Like they didn't really understand like my mindset. They obviously wanted to show me some empathy. They obviously wanted to show me some sympathy, but they didn't really know how to approach me with it
Yeah.
because like everybody's situation is so different, and everyone's sort of the point of reference for cancer for so many people are so different depending on
Hmm.
who they know that had cancer and what their experience was like. So I think there was a lot of like I definitely felt a lot of the uncertainty and sort of the tiptoeing around the questions or tiptoeing around like how I felt. But I did also feel a lot of the support as well, and I think that was like one of like the positive moments of it is even though I didn't feel any negative or any sort of anything that made me feel awkward. It was more so like I felt a lot of uncertainty. Like people didn't
Mm.
know how to people didn't really know how to talk to me about it and sort of look to me to frame the conversation.
Mm.
And I'm a very optimistic person, so when I would frame the conversation, I brought up the good and the positives that came out of everything, as well as like I think with some deep friends and family, and especially my wife, like I was able to go in deeper and just talk about like just how scary the whole situation was.
And were you able to, lean on support groups? So were you, as a young survivor, did you ever feel kind of off with the support groups? I know that that's something I've talked about with other young survivors, where there's a certain distance that you end up feeling being a part of certain support groups. If you did turn to them, did you ever feel that that was the case, or was it a different type of experience?
I didn't turn to him as much. Again, I think because of this the time there was
Yeah.
everything was done digitally, but the second time around I turned, and that's when I turned to like the KCA. And
Yeah.
because for me, I started thinking coming out of it all, where my mindset was uh or at least I guess like the big aha I had from the second time around, besides like the health and the thinking in moments and thinking outside of work, was the inequity in care. Like
Yeah.
I almost felt guilty that I had such great care, and I was almost mad that like not everybody has this level of care, and was like, okay, what can I do now to help provide this sort of care for people? And when I would go talk to Dr. Porter, I was like, he's the person who introduced me to the KCA. I'm like, what can I do? Like, this was such an amazing experience. Like, for all things considering, like, I'm really happy how things turned out. And I'm more so want to make sure other people have this sort of care. And
Hmm.
like, and so that's where like I think my relationship with the KCA started. Where the first time it was more suppressing and trying to forget I had it and thinking about myself going forward. The second time was much more around like how can I create the support groups that I want to see in the world, and how can I
Yeah.
create the support so that I can so that more people can have this can more people can experience what I experienced, because this was really like American medicine, American treatment, American healthcare at its best. And
Yeah.
how can more people experience this? Uh, because like I just thought it was unfair, and I think I kind of really went to like that mindset of like, what can I do more of? Yeah, what can I do more of to provide so that the inequity or the equity within healthcare is closed.
No, I think that's fantastic. Fantastic mission. That's something I've started thinking about recently a little bit more of. Not that I never thought about it before. It's always something on my mind, but I think more recently learning about people's surveillance strategies and how they're so inequitable, or like they're just so different from each other. And, some are going to doctors where they don't think the standard of care is active surveillance, or like one CT scan and you're done. Don't come back to me for 5 years. And it's just like, but that's not the care you should be getting. You should be getting. So I totally get what you're saying with that in terms of having a mission.
Yeah, exactly. And this, yeah, like like the second time around, I have this great relationship with a nephrologist here in Seattle, and it's like, and what I love about that is it's so much more preventative care.
Mm-hmm.
Because my care kind of this time around is almost two roads. There's like the cancer stuff where I get MRIs, I go see my urologist, but there's not a lot I can do. But there's also, because I only have like 0.9 of a kidney because of the partial nephrectomy, it's like, what could I be doing to make sure my kidney's in good shape?
Yeah.
Staying hydrated, types of food I'm eating, the types of exercise I'm having, what biometrics do I need to be paying attention to? Like, now I have a blood pressure monitor that I monitor, like 3-4 times a week, where I'm checking like what I eat, how it affects things, and it's like it's a lot more preventative care. And I was like, why isn't everybody have a nephrologist? Like everybody, like, why
Yeah.
wasn't
Right.
a nephrologist suggested to me the first time around? Like, why isn't, like, why doesn't this, like, this is like, there's like, I don't want to just go see a doctor because I'm sick. I also want to make sure all of the biometrics and all of, I'm making good choices so that I'm living a positive lifestyle, so that later in life I'm not having these sort of sicknesses. And like, why doesn't more people have this? Like, why isn't this, like, why didn't my doctor in Houston tell me to do this versus like
Yes.
I had to wait, almost 10 years or so post to then like have another bout to then say, okay, now I need to be thinking about this. And that's kind of what like started to click in my mind. Then like working with the KCA, like you were saying, and like hearing other people's experience with their doctors and their care, it's like, why aren't more people doing these kinds of things? Like, this is like every urologist, every doctor should be screaming this from the rooftops. Like, this is the kind of like, these are the things that are so important.
Uh, uh,
Besides, stuff like getting regular checkups and all of
yeah.
that.
No, 100%. And I'm glad that you brought up kidney health, right? Because that's something I think, in my experience talking to people, they don't realize it's something that's part of the treatment, right? Like, it's not just making sure you don't get it. Like, you have to maintain your kidney health afterwards. Like, that's a really big impact of kidney cancer. But that makes me think about like our relationship with age, right? You kind of touched on it
Yes.
throughout the conversation, but thinking preventative care, making sure your kidneys intact, your health's there, you're non dialysis. How has your relationship with age and aging changed?
Ooh, great question. I've never really thought about that actually. Uh, but I mean, it's I sort of touched on it. I think now it's very much the types of things and the types of foods I put into my body.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've realized that I grew up in Texas. I'm a very emotional eater. I love to eat. I love to eat Southern food, but realizing that everything you put into your body has an effect.
Yep.
And everything you put in your body has, and sometimes you're eating for emotional, and I realized like how much emotional eating I was doing. I'm cold and dark and it's depressing here in Seattle, so I'm going to eat fried chicken to like boost up my spirits. And it's realizing that that you can't always emotionally eat.
Yeah.
You can't always like these decisions you make and what you decide to put into your body, and the accumulation of all of these micro decisions have big impacts in the end. And when you're really monitoring that, you really can start to look back and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't be eating this stuff. Maybe I should learn to eat a different way. And it's really changed my relationship and really the way I eat and cook and my entire relationship with food in general. Like I garden now, so I can grow my own tomatoes and make food with it. I cook a lot more at home. I don't use salt in my food. I try not to eat out that often. Like there's just a lot of like these like little tiny micro decisions where before it's like, oh, I eat a slice of pizza, who cares, right? And it's like, no, like eat a slice of pizza then, but I also ate one, and then you
Yeah.
understand like how all those decisions sort of connect into a greater, thing, which is like your health,
Yeah.
and why that's important.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of that 180 from that 28-year-old reckless kid who just found out he had kidney cancer.
Exactly. It's like I'm just like super extra, like, oh, how much salt is in that? Or
Yes.
like, can you not put salt in that food? Or like, if it's just like, yeah, like, oh, what's the sodium? Like, I'm reading package. I'm the
Yep.
person at the grocery store, like, turning over and like, oh, what's the like
Yep.
calorie to sodium ratio on this? Like, oh, that's not good. Turn that around.
Yeah.
It's very, yeah, it's almost completely different, and that's like a perfect example. It is the 180 degrees. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, like I already had one beer today. I probably should have a second.
Yeah. But I guess what would be your advice to other young cancer survivors, right? Going through this in terms of how they feel about going through cancer, the relationship they have with themselves and putting it through the lens of age. What would be some of your takeaways to share with them?
I think one of the most important things, and the thing I'm most happy I did, and will continue doing, is no matter how great you feel, no matter how much time has passed between your diagnosis to the current time, uh, just always stay up on your testing, your medical checks. Like I there was times when I was coming to a point where I'm like, I'm I'm 6, 8 years clear. I don't need to go to I don't need to go to my checkups. I don't need to go do these things. I'm pretty clear now. I can become a little bit more relaxed on it, and realizing that like that's, I think, why I had such a great experience the second time, is they caught it very early.
Yeah.
They were able to do a partial nephrectomy. I didn't. I was able to, like, there were just a lot of positives that happened because they caught it so soon. And some of like the bad scenarios that happen when stuff gets so big and spreads and develops, and like, so like, I think just staying up to date, even if you feel fine, even if you're eating well, even if you're everything's okay, just like always keep up with your testing, and build a great relationship with your doctors, because like at the end, those are going to be the most important things you have for a positive recovery. um, I think number two, realizing that you're not in this alone. There's lots of people who experience this at a very young age, and there's lots of great organizations like the KCA, that have resources. I'm on the KCA. Oh, actually, I'm on the Northwest Kidney Center. I'm on their recipes guide, almost like on a weekly basis, experimenting with different foods, and that. And I think number three, it's, if you are, just, if you're afraid to ask for help, you're never going to get help. And that,
Yeah.
realizing that no matter what, no matter what, and this kind of good thing goes back to the community aspect of point two, is that we're all sort of navigating this together, and there's lots of great resources out there. So don't be afraid to Google, don't be afraid to ask for, or reach out to organizations, and it's okay. We'll get through this, and it's a positive joy. It could lead to a positive thing, and only you can decide how you respond to things. And yeah, and it's okay. People, we're here to support you, and there's lots of great resources.
I'm so grateful that you brought that up about not being alone, because I think it can be, when you're a young survivor, it can be very isolating being in a waiting room when you're like the only one or two 20 something, 30 something that's there for cancer treatment, right? Or a cancer surveillance. And it could just end up feeling really isolating. And if you don't know where to turn, you just kind of internalize it. So I'm so grateful that you're reinforcing that point of like, find people, because you're not, you aren't alone.
Yeah, yeah. I actually just had my MRI, my annual MRI yesterday, and luckily I'm cancer free for another year, so that's great.
Yay.
But funny you mentioned it. I was in the MRI room waiting to get my test done, and I might have been the youngest person in the room by like 30 years.
Yep.
And it's a you and it can feel isolating, but like you, like myself, like there are lots of young people who experience this, and unless we raise our hand, we'll never find those people and never be able to share those like shared experiences, because there are things you and I experience that no one else has, and we can
Yep.
bond over that almost instantaneously.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason, for joining me for this conversation today. It was really wonderful to hear more about your story and your experiences.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Kidney Cancer Unfiltered, brought to you by the Kidney Cancer Association. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts to get episodes weekly. And if you like the show, we'd love it if you left a review. It really helps others find us. Thanks again for listening. For more information about kidney cancer, visit the Kidney Cancer Association online at kidneycancer.org.